Well, welcome to Christian Answers. This is Pastor Jeff Short, your Bible teacher and cultural commentator. And today we are continuing on with the series on how Christians are to respond to the nation of Israel. How do we view the nation of Israel? How do we view Jewish people today in respect to the Old Testament Jewish people? How should the Christian church respond to Israel, the modern state, against the Jewish state of Israel in the Old Testament with kings like David and Solomon and so on and so forth? How are we to view our support or non-support of the national Israel today? And there does seem to be a big division within Christianity, and it seems to be a division on the conservative side of the aisle of politics also about how we are to respond to Israel. Because a lot of people, a lot of Christians, you hear visible people who identify with Christianity are beginning to say, hey, wait, why do we have to support Israel? And other pastors are even saying, hey, the nation of Israel today, the modern state, is not the same as the Jewish people in the Old Testament. We don't have any loyalty to the national state of Israel today, and so on and so forth. So how do we sort this out? Well, I've dealt with this on different videos on this topic, but today I want to talk about a conversation that two alleged Christians, supposedly Christians, Tucker Carlson claims to be a Christian. I think he's an Anglican Christian, if I'm not mistaken. And then Matt Walsh is a Roman Catholic Christian. So you have two Christians talking about Israel, and they take a very casual, very lackadaisical view of the modern state of Israel, and a very apathetic state of Israel. They like to say that, hey, as Christians, we are in no way obligated biblically to support Israel. Israel is a nation like any other nation, like Ireland, like Nigeria. Israel has a right to its own existence, just like any other nation has a right to existence. And they take a very indifferent attitude toward the modern state of Israel, which is not in keeping with most Christians, evangelical Christians, who actually see the modern state of Israel as a fulfillment in the continuity of the Old Testament Jews. And even though they may not say that the modern state of Israel is the very same thing as the Old Testament Jews, most Christians, evangelical Bible-believing Christians, say that the modern state of Israel is connected to the biblical Jewish nation, and that there is continuity in some degree with the land promises that God gave the Jews in the Old Testament. And so we need to look at the nation of Israel today, the modern state, even if it's secular, as a special, unique entity on this earth that God is preserving for some reason in the end times, which the Bible talks about, that there will be a role of Jews and the nation of Israel and Jerusalem that will play a key part in the end times when Jesus returns. And there will be a mass conversion of the Jewish people, and they will accept Jesus as Messiah and come to Christ just like everyone else does and receive salvation. And so it makes all the sense in the world as a Christian, a Bible-believing Christian, to look at the modern state of Israel and saying, yeah, they're secular now, and they're unbelievers now, and they're rebelling against the gospel message of Christ, his death on the cross for their sins. But there is a coming time in the end times when they will convert to Jesus Christ. They will understand that he is the Messiah, and they will follow him and honor him. And it makes perfect sense that God would regather the ancient people, the ethnic Jews, together in the Holy Land, in and around Jerusalem, for these important end-time events to take place, whenever they take place. So that's the sort of the setup for this conversation, and I wanted to jump in and react to what they're talking about, because they're both, like I said before, taking a very blasé, apathetic view of the importance and the uniqueness of the modern state of Israel. And this is something that I totally do not understand coming from Christians who read the same Bible. I mean, if you're a Bible-believing Christian, you read the Bible every single day, you dig into the Old Testament like the New Testament, and then you turn to the modern state of Israel and go, oh yeah, well, nothing special there, nothing to see. It doesn't make sense to me, but maybe this conversation will help make sense of it. Maybe it won't. Let's jump in and see what these two are talking about.
As I heard you explain who you're fighting against and why, and I nodded along in agreement, I really was the choir to your sermon. Last year, in 35 years, I don't think I've talked about Israel 10 times. So here's the point. It's not actually about Israel. It's about the components of the American right.
Right.
Who are defending mass murder, and I mean that murder, killing people who didn't do anything wrong, in Gaza. That's it. It's not Israel. It's what about the parts of this coalition that, as you noted, Charlie really did keep together, that are now fracturing. But one of the reasons they're fracturing is because they have different views, different worldviews, and that is obvious when you hear how they respond to the murder of kids and women in Gaza.
Okay, so he's talking about Israel's response to the terrorist attack a few years ago. And they went into Gaza City looking for the terrorists. They had to go into the city. Unfortunately, the cowardly terrorists are hiding behind innocent civilians. And so the Jewish defense forces had to go into Gaza City and try to separate the civilians from the terrorists. And that's a hard thing to do. Now, Tucker Carlson summarizes the whole operation as whether they're massacring, they're slaughtering innocent people. That's immoral. That's evil. That's genocide. Shame on the Jews. Without making any kind of nuanced distinction between people trying to go in and take out the terrorists and civilians getting caught in between the bullets. That is not the slaughter. That is not the intentional genocide of a people. That is trying to do something that's almost nearly impossible, which is to get the bad guys who are hiding amongst the civilians. So he's summarizing the whole thing with this very emotional, very ignorant summary of saying, hey, they're slaughtering people. Well, no, they're not. That's not their intention. They're trying to not slaughter people, but it's very hard when the bad guys hide behind the civilians.
Americans responding to that. Are you really conservative? How are you not the leftist that you just described if you're like, well, they're basically all Hamas, including the kids? That is collective punishment. That's blood guilt. That's the opposite of what you described. How can I be on the same side as someone with that attitude?
Well, here's what I would say. I think that if somebody is making the argument that we or Israel can kill as many Palestinians as they want, can kill children because their lives have no value because they're Palestinian, if you're making that argument, then that is a leftist argument.
Exactly. It's a leftist argument.
However, I think that there are plenty of people who would defend and have defended Israel's actions in Gaza and even our involvement, which I don't agree with us being involved at all, but people have had that view. But not on that basis. What they would say is, they would say, oh, well, it's not true that they're killing children. It's not, or it's really tragic, but it's there's no other way to fight the war. It's not intentional. We're actually targeting the terrorists, and these are casualties that happen like in any war. It's very bad. You try to minimize them, but we don't want that to happen. They could say, there's many arguments along those lines. Just also arguments that just kind of reject the premise. Like your premise is that they're doing mass murder of people in Gaza. I think that there are conservatives who would just reject that premise and say that's not actually happening.
Okay, but if you I think the undisputed facts are tens of thousands, 70,000.
Right. So Matt Walsh is trying to bring some sanity into Tucker Carlson's overly emotional response to, I guess, warfare. You could say the same thing when the Allies went over to fight the Nazi Germans. Okay, are there going to be civilians that get injured and even killed? Yes. How do you avoid that if you're going to fight the Nazis? You can't. If you decide that you're not going to ever injure or even kill civilians who happen to get in the way of the fighting and the warfare, if you decide you're never going to kill any civilians accidentally, then you're never going to fight a war, which is totally impossible. So I don't understand Tucker Carlson's logic. How do you fight the bad guy without inadvertently hurting innocent people? And he hasn't answered that question.
certainly say tens of thousands of women and children killed in Gaza. And so there are really two arguments you can make. One is that like that happens in war, collateral damage, which is true. It's 100% true that always happens in war. It hasn't happened at this scale in 80 years, but in the West, but it does happen. And the United States has done a lot of it. We dropped the atom bombs. Okay. So like Israel's not the only country that's done this, but what are you sad about it? Do you think it's bad? Would you be willing to say, holy shit, I can't believe we killed 70,000 non-combatants? That's the acid test. Can you admit that that's horrible? It's horrible. It's a moral crime. It was a moral crime. We dropped the bomb on Hiroshima. And it's not even a close call in my view. It's not an endorsement of the Imperial Japanese government, but it's like, that's just bad. If you can't say that, then you are endorsing collective punishment, aren't you?
Well, I think it goes back to what argument are you making? So like using Hiroshima, for example. And I'll be honest, I've kind of been on both sides of that. I think there's interesting arguments on both sides. I think a morally untenable argument would be, well, yeah, just kill as many as you need to. They don't matter. They were Japanese. They were the enemy. Just kill them. Like, that's morally untenable, obviously. And based on that argument, well, then we could just nuke. If you get into war, just like nuke the entire country, kill everybody. And why not? And that obviously is that is rejecting the value of human life, which is an unconservative view. It's also just deeply immoral.
Right, and that is what the Israelis and the United States military do not do. The leaders of the military in the United States do not come in and say, let's kill as many Iranians as is necessary to end terrorism. No, they don't say that. They say, let's kill as many bad guys who are fomenting terrorism all around the world and are causing violence and all kinds of destruction. Let's kill those guys. Let's take them out. Let's stop that terrorism. And hopefully we can do so with the minimal amount of civilian casualties and collateral damage. That's what they're trying. Tucker Carlson is saying, hey, well, you're still killing too many. It's totally beyond justification. And Israel and the United States are saying, no, wait, we're going to get the bad guys. And we are not targeting civilians. We are not targeting people who are not active combatants. But they are going to get killed, and we still have to go in and get the bad guys. And so Matt Walsh is trying to be a little bit nuanced here with Tucker Carlson, but it seems like it's not getting anywhere with Tucker Carlson. He is just on this track that U.S. bad, Israel bad, they're committing genocide, and it needs to stop. That is not what is really happening.
Well, the other side of the argument for like the atom bomb, for example, would say, well, this was the best way to preserve human life. That these were legitimate military targets, and the way to preserve human life ultimately was this way. If we had not done it, then millions more people would have died. Millions more Japanese would have died. And that's the argument. Now, like I said, I can see the argument for that. Now, that runs into the charge of ends justify the means.
Well, it doesn't run into the charge. It's an expression of ends justify.
Well, there's ends justify the means.
It's like the perfect articulation of it. It's like, if I could save millions by shooting your children, it's okay to shoot your children.
But I think there's ends justify the means. Now we're getting into philosophical. I'm not a philosopher. There's ends justify the means. There's also kind of the principle of double effect, which is different. And double effect is, well, as I understand it, you can do something that you know will have a negative effect, but your intentions are good, and you're doing it in order to bring about a good result.
This was the argument that Hitler and Stalin made. If you take a look at Stalin's personal correspondence and diaries, which, by the way, are available, it's super interesting, he was an idealist.
The problem with Hitler and the Soviet Union is that they were wrong in their assumptions about human nature. They did not care about the value of human life, like the Judeo-Christian tradition teaches. So you cannot compare the U.S. and the Israeli army with Hitler and Stalin. You cannot do that because they come from total different foundations. So this is totally illegitimate.
He really believed he was ushering in a new era of man. And like, you had to kill a lot of Ukrainians to do that, and Georgians and Russians, by the way, a lot of Christians. You had to murder a lot of priests to get there. But by the end, you would have utopia. Hitler felt that way. It's like, if we only get the Jews out, everything will be great.
No.
And so,
that's not a valid argument.
We don't share that view. We believe in human life. Like, it's not okay to kill an innocent person.
Yeah, I think that argument. Well, it's not. Yeah, it's not okay to intentionally and deliberately kill an innocent person. I think that's. In war, innocent people do die. I think that there are a lot of wars that have been unjust. There is such a thing as a just war. There's such a thing as a necessary war. And if we can agree on that, then we have to accept that in any war, innocent people will die. It's a terrible tragedy. So now, but the argument that I was just laying out for dropping the atom bomb, it's true. Like that can be terribly abused. My only point is, and I'm not even taking a position on that, because my honest view is like, I kind of feel like I have an opinion of it, and then I express it, and someone comes and they just eviscerate my argument on it, and then I think, well, you might be right, and then I hear so like that's kind of
these
where
are super tough. I mean, I should just say, I hope I don't sound self-righteous. My views have changed. If you went through my corpus of opinions, it would be a Jackson Pollock painting. It would just be splashes of everything. So like my views are evolving in real time. But I've been forced to think about it because of what's happening in Gaza. It's like I don't feel like I have a choice.
Okay, so Tucker is saying what is happening in Gaza with the Israeli army going in there to get the terrorists, and they're killing innocent civilians and bombing innocent civilians, and a lot of collateral damage. Tucker Carlson is saying the collateral damage of going into Gaza is too great, so you can't go into Gaza. He's saying that the only way you could justify going into Gaza if you're a Jew and defending Israel is to go in without collateral damage. And the problem with that is, again, like I said before, is the terrorists cowardly hide underneath hospitals, they hide under schools, they hide in civilian homes. They are doing everything they can because they know that the Israelis try not to bomb civilians. They know Israelis try not to target schools or hospitals. They know that there is morality on the Israeli side. And so they purposely, intentionally hide behind these civilian targets, knowing that Israel will be reluctant to try to go in and take them out because of all of the collateral damage. That proves the point that the Israelis are not intentionally targeting civilians. And it's the same way in the Iran war here. The United States, with its bombs and its jets and all of its military hardware, they are not intentionally targeting civilian populations. They are not intentionally trying to kill as many Iranians as they can. They are trying to surgically kill as many of the soldiers of the Iranian Republican Guard, and they're trying to kill as many of the leaders of the terrorist regime that's in power there. They're trying to take those people out. They're trying to take the weapons out. They're trying to take the nuclear facilities out and the nuclear storage facilities out. They're trying to take strategic weapons, munitions, leadership sites out without destroying the civilian population. And Tucker Carlson doesn't like the fact that people are dying who are not combatants. And he's trying to say, this is immoral, it's genocide, we're doing evil, we're wicked. He's trying to cast this big aspersions against Israel and the United States when he knows that when we went over to try to fight Hitler and the Germans and the Nazis, that we had to go into the towns and cities. And it was, war is not pretty and war is not good. It's not, that's why we want a peace. But he's trying to oversimplify it and say that it's even bad to go in and get the terrorists if you're going to affect the civilian population. That is just an impossible dilemma. You can't fight a war that way. You can't do anything that way.
My point about that is whatever is the correct view. Let's just accept for the sake of argument. Like, I'll take your view that dropping the atom bomb was morally wrong. I still think that somebody could be wrong about that, but for the right reasons. And so they're still kind of on my side because the wrong, if you're correct in your argument, then the wrong for the right reasons position is, yeah, we cherish human life. This was the best way ultimately to preserve human life. And again, you could say, well, that's wrong, but someone could have that view. And the reason why they have it is because they truly believe in the sanctity of human life, and they just honestly believe that that was the best way to preserve it.
That was my opinion until recently as a lifelong adamant pro-lifer. Right. So I mean, I want to give myself the benefit of the doubt. I'm not for dead kids.
Do you remember this line from the Night Before Christmas quote?
He's not for dead kids. Again, what happens with Tucker Carlson is that he takes a very highly charged emotional issue, and then he emotionalizes it with his voice, and he says that's just evil to go into Gaza and hurt the terrorists. That's just evil. That's terrible, evil, bad, and he simplifies it to the point of ridiculous. Let's see what he said at the beginning of his interview here.
Agreement. I really was the choir to your sermon. I thought you're describing the people who defend the war in Gaza perfectly. They don't believe in absolute standards of truth at all. What they're committing in Gaza is exactly what they decry correctly when it happens to other people.
Okay, that is a false statement. He says the people who support Israel's entering into Gaza and taking out the terrorists and killing inadvertently casualties of the civilian population, they don't believe in absolute truth. That is false. You can believe in absolute truth and believe that these terrorists have to be stopped, and you're going to go in and stop them. And you're, unfortunately, in doing so, people are going to die that are not terrorists or that are not direct combatants. Again, it's very hard to know exactly who the terrorists are in the civilian population and who are the terrorist sympathizers in the civilian population and who are the people who don't side with the terrorists or the people who are actually against the terrorists. It's hard to know in Gaza City, for example. So if you go in to take the terrorists out, you're going to be upsetting a lot of people in a lot of different ways. But Israel, this tiny nation in the midst of a sea of Islamic terrorists, says we have to stop this terrorist group. And we are going to stop them because we're not going to have over and over again terrorist groups and terrorist volunteers from the general population. That's what happened in the latest attack. There were, of course, the trained terrorists, but then there were also just regular citizens from Gaza City who also supported the terrorists, and they joined in the murderous attack a couple of years ago. And so the Israeli says, look, we're not going to just stand by and let our country be continuously attacked by people who hate us and want us to be wiped off the face of the earth. We're going to go in and we're going to clear out these terrorists. Now, there will be civilians that are injured and even killed, but it's not our intention to do that. For Tucker Carlson, he looks at the number of civilians that are reported to have been killed or injured. Again, I don't know what the accurate statistics are on this. You can't automatically believe the Palestinian authorities when they put out numbers. You can't believe really any of the news that they put out because it's propaganda, of course. They want it to the advantage of the Palestinian statehood. But, okay, let's say that there are thousands and thousands of civilians that have died. Well, does Israel, is that their goal, to try to kill civilians? No. The goal is to try to kill the terrorists. But how do you fight a war without killing civilians? It's very hard, especially, again, with the terrorists hiding behind them. So it's not immoral, and it's not dealing with people who don't have any moral standards, and it's not dealing with people who don't value human life. It's just that, are you going to fight this war or are you not? And it boils down to, okay, if you're going to fight the war, how are you going to fight it? And how do you win it? And he's dealing in a theoretical world. He's dealing with this idealistic world. The world is a messy place. It's a very violent place. It's a very sad place in many ways. And if we can just get these groups in the Middle East to realize, hey, look, just leave the Jews alone. They have a little spot of land. Just leave them alone. Arab nations surround them. Millions and millions of more people surround them. Just let this little enclave alone. That's all they want. They don't want to take over your land. They just want to be left alone.
Kill innocents. They didn't do anything wrong. Not on purpose, you can. Period. You're not allowed to do that, but they defend it fully. So they don't believe in an absolute standard of behavior at all. They don't believe in truth. It's dependent.
They don't believe in truth. So the people, the Jews, and even Christians in the United States who support the Jews, when they say, yes, we support going into Gaza and rooting out the terrorists, we don't believe in absolute truth, right? That's what he's saying. No. That is totally, highly emotionalized rhetoric. He is using an internet platform sort of as a demagogue. He's using his platform as to propagandize this highly emotionalized rhetoric instead of actually trying to sanely look at the situation and realize that, hey, you can disagree and not demonize the person. So Tucker Carlson is demonizing Christians who say we support Israel in their ongoing war against terror. He's demonizing us. He's trying to say you're evil, you're hypocritical, you're not following the way of Christ. Instead of saying, okay, please explain to me how you can justify these thousands of deaths in Gaza City. Okay? And Matt Walsh has tried to open that argument up to him. I don't think he's listening.
And upon circumstance, like, in fact, you've even seen people say it out loud. We raised an entire generation correctly to believe that slaughtering people because of how they were born is the greatest sin, which it is. I believe that. And now we're being, hoisted by our own standards.
No, he's not. The Jews are not slaughtering people because of who they were born or where they were born. Again, this oversimplification and emotionalizing the situation does not help. And this is a problem that Tucker Carlson has. He over-emotionalizes issues, and he refuses to sit down with a sound, calm reason and say, okay, let's actually talk about this without getting hysterical about it.
No, standards are absolute. It's either true or it's not. And it's universally applicable or it's not a real thing. It's just it's identity politics. It's exactly what I hate. And identity politics is the kind of political expression of the worldview that you have just decried and declared war against. And God bless you for doing that. But that is in full flower on the right. And I don't want to dignify people by naming them, but people I know who call themselves like MAGA conservatives are defending the murder of innocents. And by the way, some of them suggest
the murder of innocents. No. I don't know of anybody that's defending the murder of innocents. Like Herod, looking for the baby Jesus and slaughtering a whole town. No. I don't know anyone who he's describing.
Move the refugees into the United States because that's good for the country that they support. But is that good for us? That's an attack on American identity. You're also describing, by the way, in a lot of ways, Nicolas Maduro of Venezuela, who we're all required to hate. And I'm not supporting him, of course. But this is like the most socially conservative country in Latin America that has banned abortion, banned gay marriage, banned gender transitions, banned usury, banned loaning at crazy interest levels because it destroys people. I don't think he's done a good job running his country. Obviously, he hasn't. But to your point that we should be open to talking to people who share our most basic values, how is he not on that list? Oh, shut up, you communist, but I'm not a communist. I'm not going to be bullied by your dumb labels. Not yours, but I'm anticipating the many attacks. I have been attacked for saying that, but it's just...
Okay, so he is talking about the messy world of trying to figure out who to support and who not to support. And if you look back in some of the really bad people in history, you will find out that a lot of them did align with the Judeo-Christian worldview on certain things, but that's not why, for example, we went in as allies to fight Hitler and the Nazis. The Nazis had some views that do line up with the Judeo-Christian view. I think it was, I'll have to verify this, but I think Hitler was against abortion, at least in the beginning. So that would be pro-life. Hey, he's pro-life. We should be on his side. No, not necessarily, because he could be a hypocrite, and he was a hypocrite, and he was evil. So just because the devil has an issue that the devil is promoting right now that aligns something with you agree, it doesn't mean that you shouldn't go ahead and oppose him. And so we went in for Hitler and opposed him, the Nazis. We opposed the Soviet Union, but if you go through the whole Soviet Union ideology, you'll find out that there are probably points of agreement in their whole entire platform. So yeah, just because he's mentioning these issues shouldn't cause us to not go in and get the bad guys. And so we'll continue this discussion at another time, but hope this has been worthwhile, and we will talk to you next week on another edition. God bless.